The Nittany Lions are now losing ground on Trebor Pena. So will they even land him?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football and the transfer portal. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, we are hitting on a lot of topics in today's show. Trebor Pena update as Penn State is losing ground. Will the Nittany Lions still be able to land him? Newly entered transfer linebacker into the portal is drawing interest from Penn State, specifically Penn State players. And Penn State picks up a commitment from a defensive lineman in the class of 2026, but he's unranked. So is he any good? Well, Penn State takes that commitment for a reason. Drop your comments down below. Let me know your thoughts. Be a part of the conversation. Beginning with Trebor Pena. Well, Pena is setting up visits to other big-time Power 4 schools. Miami, Florida, which we talked about in yesterday's episode, was going to be a player here. Well, they certainly are. The Hurricanes are getting a visit, but so are the USC Trojans and the UCLA Bruins. Penn State is losing ground here simply by the fact of time. Every time that Pena takes another visit, every time that Pena gets to have another conversation with a different school, Penn State is going to lose ground because On3 reported it that Penn State was in the lead, that they had made a good pitch, that Trebor Pena was certainly interested, that Penn State definitely wanted him. We know that they made a nice offer to him, but it wasn't enough to seal the deal, that he felt the need to leave Happy Valley and go explore his options. So as time rolls on, Penn State is going to lose ground. And it allows schools like Miami, USC, UCLA to make a better pitch. It just gives them the opportunity. So they can say, well, what did Penn State tell you? They can ask, what did Penn State offer in terms of NIL? And that's what's interesting about these three schools, is that they certainly have NIL money to spend. Something else that they also have in common is that these are more pass-heavy offenses. Penn State is a run-first team. They didn't bring back Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen for no reason, okay? They brought them back with the intent to be a run-heavy football team. Pena was certainly told that because he is coming from a Syracuse offense where he was utilized pretty heavily. So that's what everyone is probably going to wonder here is, why is Penn State losing ground? This is a national title contending team. Penn State could easily make Pena the starting slot receiver, but he's certainly going to regress in terms of his role within the offense. That was one of the top playmakers in Syracuse's offense a season ago. 80 catches, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns, right? Roughly. That's a pretty solid stat line, if I'm saying. That would have been statistically the #1 wide receiver for Penn State, but there's no Tyler Warren anymore. But Singleton is back. Allen is back. The tight ends are still going to be heavily utilized with Luke Reynolds and Khalil Dinkins and Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross. So there's certainly going to be a timeshare all around in this offense. And in that passing game, Singleton and Allen will be used in the passing game. Whereas if you look at a Miami, you look at a USC, a UCLA, there is, to an extent, some uncertainty. There is a place to carve out a role and be one of the top playmakers within that offense, especially in the passing game, respectively. I'm not an expert on all three of them, on Miami, USC, and UCLA. But since there's been a reshuffling at the deck, particularly at USC and UCLA, it seems that there might be a serious opportunity for Pena to maybe find himself in a better situation. Because as we know, yes, NIL money is a factor, but so is, where is he going to develop? Where is he going to be showcased and have an opportunity to better suit himself for the NFL in a year's time? Maybe Pena doesn't believe that that's at Penn State. So will they actually land him? Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm not saying that Penn State, I've said it, they are losing ground as time moves past. But if Miami is able to offer him more NIL money, a bigger stake in the offense, yeah, that's probably going to be a little more appealing than just a national title and being one of the contributors in the offense. Who knows at the end of the day? What is going on here is Pena is simply weighing his options. Pena's weighing his options, and that's okay. But still, I think it is worth pointing out that that he walked away from Penn State, but Penn State also got that first visit. That was the first visit that Penn State had for a transfer portal player, period. And it was also Pena's first visit. So he's just weighing his options. He certainly could come back and be a Penn State Nittany Lion after these 3 other visits. Maybe he doesn't even take all 3 of them. If Penn State is serious, they will make a push for him. But I don't know that they will. I don't know that they will at the end of the day. They might just let this go to the wayside because we've already talked about it before. Pena is not the superstar caliber wide receiver. And is it worth it bringing him in? Because I do see some of the comments on social media. Pay him whatever he wants. It is worth it. Bring him in. He's a talented wide receiver. He's a talented wide receiver, all right. But I don't know if it's worth opening up the NIL war chest just to bring in somebody that certainly did benefit from a pass-heavy offense at Syracuse, where there really weren't a lot of other complementary playmakers with Syracuse last season, so you had to go to Trebor Pena by all accounts, whereas now you are in more of a timeshare because there are other players that are better than you. Pena may start at Penn State, but Singleton's a better football player. Allen's a better football player. Heck, I'd even argue that Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross are certainly better football players in terms of options within the offense. If Pena is concerned about that, then Penn State's not right for him. But if he wants to help make Penn State better, get them closer to a national title, then that's a different story here. My expectations have certainly changed here. If they were some other fringe schools, these are serious, big-time, high-profile institutions. USC, UCLA, Miami of Florida, those are all places where you can showcase your skills. If that's really what Pena is concerned about above all else, then go to one of those other institutions because those are big brands where you will be able to do just that and still develop and be in more of a pass-heavy situation. I do want to take this to another angle. Penn State, James Franklin, well, they can't recruit wide receivers. They still struggle with that. I think this one is a Trebor Pena specific situation. It's because Penn State, well, if they had such trouble recruiting wide receivers, then Kyron Hudson wouldn't have showed up. Devontae Ross wouldn't be in Happy Valley. And Penn State just recently landed a commitment. Now, granted, I know it's far in the future for 2027, the class of 2027, but Khalil Taylor is a pending 5-star. He's already ranked around the top 30 at this point in time. Rankings change. I get that. But when you have 5-star potential and wide receivers can't succeed at Penn State. It hasn't been the best track record for 2 years. I don't blame Pena for wanting to explore his options. He very well could end up at Penn State. I give this more of a 50-50 shot with the chances that the field is going to win in this case, that he will end up at UCLA, USC, or Miami, one of the 3, as opposed to Penn State. I couldn't tell you which one because I don't know which one is more wide receiver needy at this point in time. But I think those schools certainly have something more to offer for what Pena is looking for than Penn State in comparison. It seemed like things were going well. He did get that first visit, but I think Penn State was upfront and honest with him that you're going to be more of a compliment rather than a feature within the offense. So we'll see what those other schools pitch in return. But Penn State is definitely serious. They want Pena, and we're going to monitor it from there. Penn State has been relatively quiet in the transfer portal, but there seems to be some interest brewing for a North Carolina linebacker that just entered his name. Penn State players want him to be a teammate for this season. Is it realistic? Plus, a Penn State defensive lineman did happen to enter his name into the portal. The impact of that, we'll discuss it on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. You get surprising insights. When I actually started using Monarch Money for myself, I realized just how much I was spending on different things like package deliveries, eating out, groceries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You'll get all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And you'll get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is right, 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. And remember, still to come in the show, we are going to talk about a commitment for Penn State in the class of 2026, an unranked prospect. Why did Penn State pick up an unranked prospect? Well, a lot of upside there. We'll tell you why in the final segment of the show. Let's get back to the transfer portal, the present as opposed to the future here. Amari Campbell is that North Carolina linebacker that has hit the portal. This guy was defined as a star. North Carolina outlets, publications all seem to be in the same agreement. They agree here that they are losing a star defender that was certainly going to be one of the faces of the North Carolina defense. So Amari Campbell is a dude. And Penn State, some Penn State fans say that, hey, Penn State still needs linebacker help. And I'm not opposed to Penn State getting depth, getting additions to any position group. Would I say that linebacker is a need? It's difficult for me, especially when we're talking about Campbell here. So Campbell certainly is a star, was a star at least for the North Carolina defense. 74 tackles a season ago. And he wasn't even the main linebacker, but he was going to step into a role where he was going to be one of the biggest playmakers, if not the biggest playmaker for the Tar Heel defense this season. Something that really stands out to me is 6.5 sacks. Okay. So Bill Belichick is certainly losing a quality defender here. I think he's a little undersized for linebacker. I mean, he's 6 foot, 230 pounds. We see Penn State linebackers, they'll be over 6 foot typically. I mean, I guess I'm thinking of, right, Abdul Carter and Micah Parsons. So that's the prime superstar, but he's definitely undersized here at linebacker. What's the connection to Penn State? Because Penn State players are calling for him to join the Nittany Lions. Well, Tony Rojas was certainly vocal. They're both from the Virginia area, so there's that connection there. Zane Durant also posted to his social media about him. So there are Nittany Lion players that are interested in adding Campbell. I don't know that there's a need here, though. There is no prior connection between Penn State and the coaching staff as he was not recruited. There was no offer out of high school. So this would be a totally new organic relationship if Campbell and Penn State were to happen to try to bridge that through the transfer portal this time around. So Rojas is familiar with him because they both played high school ball in Virginia. Not sure. I mean, Zane Durant probably just wants to upgrade the defense. There's nothing wrong with that there. Would he consider Penn State? It's tough to say because there's no need for him. Yes, you want as many talented defenders in your defense, but you also have to think about it from Campbell's perspective. He might be the third string linebacker in the rotation, which might be crazy to think, but it's the truth. Tony Rojas is going to be the starter at a will linebacker. I see Amari Campbell, certainly not the Mike strong side. They run a 4-2-5. So there's not a lot of need for linebackers in this case because you're only playing 2 at a time. But you have a Mike and you have a Will. Well, Dom DeLuca is going to be your starting Mike. Tony Rojas is going to be your starting Will. And Keon Wiley is going to be that third co-starter, if you will. And Wiley can play both. Frankly, any of the three of them can play both linebacker spots. But if we have to create a depth chart here for the sake of this conversation, Rojas is going to be your Will, your weak side linebacker. And Dom DeLuca is going to be your starting Mike. And then Keon Wiley is going to rotate in as that basically a 1B to both sides. He'll be the backup to both DeLuca and Rojas in this case. But again, they can all rotate because we'll see Wiley and Rojas on the field at the same time too. Meaning, where is there a spot for Campbell? Because if anything, Penn State needs a backup Mike. Well, that's going to be maybe an Anthony Specka because Tamir Robinson had moved on. He's officially transferring to USC. Anthony Specka becomes that second linebacker at the Mike spot. Kari Jackson's probably in contention for that as well. But when I look at Campbell And then I look at what Penn State needs as a weak side linebacker. You have Rojas, you have Keon Wiley, you have LeVar Arrington II. That's pretty crowded at that one spot. If I'm Amari Campbell, I'm not really looking at Penn State, even if there is interest. That 6.5 sacks tells me everything that I need to know, that he is an aggressive downhill linebacker that likes to play in open space, which is fine. But Penn State has a lot of those guys, has a lot of those kinds of linebackers. In general, it would be a phenomenal addition. We also have to talk about this again. Penn State is still well over that roster limit. So there's just not a lot of wiggle room in general when they're adding. It has to be very coordinated, which is why you see Penn State go all out and try to recruit Trebor Pena as it is to fill that starting slot receiver role. They're not going after defensive tackles. Do you notice that? Penn State is not frequently targeting. There's defensive tackles that are going into the portal. Penn State's not contacting them. Linebackers too. Penn State's not contacting them. So they're still weighing that they have to balance roster numbers at the end of the day, and they can't just add anybody and everybody that might look good on paper. Do they actually fit into what Penn State's trying to do? Well, Trebor Pena does. I don't know that Amari Campbell does here in this case. As talented as he is, I think he'd be a wonderful addition to the team, but Penn State is fine. Tony Rojas, Keon Wiley, LeVar Arrington. It's a good 1, 2, 3 at that weak linebacker spot. Let's talk about the defensive lineman that is going into the portal for Penn State. And that's Joseph Mupoyi. This is just a cut to the chase. This is not a big loss by any measure. He was an edge defender that ultimately turned into a defensive tackle. Mupoyi would have been a depth piece this season, and now he's going into the portal. Once compared to Odafe Owe, just clearly never panned out, and it's because of that position change. He wasn't really working at defensive end. Penn State has a need at defensive tackle, so they said, okay, why don't you try your hand at defensive tackle? He was in battle for that 5th or 6th defensive tackle spot, the 3rd team on the depth chart, and clearly is not going to make it. I don't think this is surprising at all. I think Penn State will be just fine. They are not devoid of depth at defensive tackle, but they do need another playmaker. Unless Penn State, again, they're not contacting any defensive tackles that are currently in the portal. So Penn State either believes one of two things. Either A, they think that they're just fine, that the Nittany Lions, James Franklin, and Deion Barnes think that they are fine at defensive tackle. They will get by with Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, Xavier Gilliam, and the cluster of unknown at defensive tackle after that. I have never said that there is a depth issue here. There is a certainty issue. You are taking the risk, the gamble that a Liam Andrews or a Randy Adarica or a Ty Blanding or a DeAndre Cook, anybody is going to step up and be able to anchor those 4th, 5th, and 6th spots, because we know that Gilliam, Ford, and Durant are the 1, 2, and 3 in that. Durant's 1, Ford's 2, Gilliam's 3. And I do like that trio. I like it. I like Durant a lot. I think Durant can be an all-conference, all-America player, frankly. I think he's in that conversation. Ford stays healthy whole season, could easily be a 2nd, maybe a 1st-team all-conference. That's his peak. I think that's Alonzo Ford's peak. He was top 30 defensive tackles in the country, according to PFF, before the injury. Just saying. So for Mupoyi to go in, Penn State has a lot of depth at defensive tackle, but not another proven playmaker past those 3. And to an extent, Gilliam, despite getting the recognition and that he's going to be the 3rd defensive tackle, still hasn't proven a lot early in his career. But I'm glad that Penn State has optimism and confidence for him going into the season. So that's just an update there, that the 5th Nittany Lion player is going into the transfer portal. Definitely expect more to enter and follow along. Speaking of defensive line, Penn State gets a commitment from an unranked defensive lineman. He's an edge defender that projects at defensive tackle. Is he any good? He definitely is. Don't let the recruiting rankings fool you. We'll talk about him on the other side of this break. Penn State adds their 12th commitment to the class of 2026, 2nd defensive lineman, 1st defensive tackle, and that is Isaac Chukwurah out of the state of Delaware. Stands at 6'2", 260 pounds presently. He's going to be listed as an edge defender or a defensive lineman, but this guy certainly projects as a defensive tackle. This one moved rather quickly, but let's talk about the upside, because he doesn't have any stars next to his name, and that's okay. That's okay. Now, depending on where you look, On3 doesn't have him ranked, ESPN doesn't have him ranked, but very quickly, 24/7 and Rivals added a projection in for him and just made him a fringe 3-star. So depending on what service you look at, he's going to be a fringe 3-star or unranked, period. He's going to move up in the recruiting rankings and should be a solid 4-star at the end of the day. The upside is the athleticism, the motor, the tenacity. He's tough. He's physical. He's quick. His build. At 6'2", 260 pounds, he's certainly going to have to grow into a defensive tackle, but he certainly reminds me a lot of Zane Durant, somebody that's athletic, someone that can play 3 downs and rush the passer from the interior. He had 17 sacks in his junior season of high school. 17 sacks. Now, that came from the defensive end position, but he just knows how to get after the quarterback. This is a big deal. Arm length. He has very long arms, so he's able to create extension and push offensive linemen off of him. The concern is he playing the best competition right now? Is he playing elite competition on a consistent basis? No. In the state of Delaware, it's not the best competition at the high school level. But Penn State does not take these commitments by accident. I want to remind everybody here. There are also a couple other Delaware prospects that are committed in the class of 2026. So now we're seeing this Delaware to Penn State pipeline form in a sense. Chukwurah is the 3rd Delaware native to commit to Penn State. Jasir Rogers also in the class of 2026. He's a wide receiver prospect. I don't know how many of you have seen some of those highlight reels circulating of him, but the potential, the athleticism, it just jumps off of the screen when you watch him. That's why Penn State takes these commitments. So they're from the same area, actually. They don't go to the same high school, but they are from the same area. And then in the class of 2027, Leighton Von Brandt could be a future superstar at offensive tackle as well. He's already a 4-star, whereas Chukwurah's unranked, and Rogers is a 3-star per the consensus, but On3 has made him a 4-star. What I'm getting at here is that Penn State doesn't take commitments by accident. They want Chukwurah in the class of 26. They want Rogers as well, because they do evaluations beyond just huddle tape and high school games. They make their own evaluations and assessments and judgments. And Chukwurah is checking off all of those boxes. He has the athleticism. He has the measurables. He wants to be at Penn State. So what they did as far as in terms of these other camps that they have, these other things that they measure prospects by to evaluate them, Chukwurah is showing up in those instances. So the recruiting rankings reflect, well, he's not playing the best competition. He had 17 sacks his junior season, so clearly he's doing something right. But the reason he's unranked is because not a lot of scouts are evaluating him to this point in time, and they look at the Delaware competitions and say, it's not that good in our opinion. So that's the reflection. That's where the recruiting ranking comes in. So it's important for these prospects to go to Penn State camps or any of these other recruiting camps to make a name for themselves if they want to boost their recruiting profiles here. So Chukwurah, clearly, when he visited Penn State for these camps, had shown that he is a legitimate prospect. They don't go off the recruiting rankings. The Penn State ignores all of that. All of the schools ignore the recruiting rankings. Let me tell you that. They do their own evaluations, or they wouldn't have jobs if they didn't make their own evaluations here. But there is there is a Delaware to Penn State pipeline forming here in this case. 3 prospects over the course of 26 and 27, and they're all legitimate. They all have tons of upside. Chukwurah, I would not be surprised if he's a solid 4-star at the end of the day. Same thing with Rogers, where the consensus is across the board, he is a 4-star. Leighton Von Brandt certainly has the potential. 5-star is pretty lofty expectations. I'm not going to go there myself, but Von Brandt certainly believes that he will be a 5-star at the end of the day in the class of 2027, if you ask him. So there's a lot of upside. Penn State doesn't take these commitments on accident. They take them on purpose. And Chukwurah does have the potential to be a solid defensive tackle that I think really mirrors what Zane Durant is right now. If you're looking for a present comparison, they're looking for him to grow into that role that Zane Durant has. 3-down defensive tackle, someone that can not only clog up running lanes, but also get after the quarterback. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the conversation. And if you want a question answered in an upcoming show, ask away in the comments section as well. If you are new to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for more conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, including football, men's basketball, and wrestling, all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Now, for your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On NFL Draft with host Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players, your favorite former Penn State Nittany Lions. Get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, the latest rumors, the latest news every day. You can find Locked On NFL Draft available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.